Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our Ask Me Anything webinar today with Chris McCabe. I hope you guys all had a great Labor Day. I mean, Labor Day is kind of your last 3-day weekend before we get into fall and Halloween and Q4. So really the end of the year is practically here. So again, I hope you had a great Labor Day, lots of time to relax, enjoy time with family, and kind of get ready to be pumped up for the rest of the year. I'm very excited for our Ask Me Anything webinars because I essentially get to do this with everyone that I have on the podcast, because Chris will tell you I just sit and pick his brain, and often the stuff we talk about doesn't always make it onto the podcast. It's just I'm a curious person. So this is your chance to be that curious person and bring all your questions. You can start posting them in the chat. Let us know what you want to talk about. I will be monitoring that and asking questions as they come in. If we don't get to everything, I'm sorry. We will do this for about an hour. The questions we don't get to, we'll schedule another one of these with Chris soon. I hope he's on board. So
it might be in an interesting time zone, but yeah, we can
So I'm going to turn the time over to Chris and start pulling questions. But Chris, go ahead, introduce yourself. I'm going to mute and turn off my camera while I get questions ready, and
sure,
then we'll jump in. But introduce yourself first.
Sure. Chris McCabe. I'm a former Amazonian. I started the consultancy ecommercechris.com, 5 years ago this month, I guess, or last month. So I've been doing this for 5 years. I was an investigator on Amazon's merchant account, seller performance, and policy enforcement teams for several years, I guess 5.5 years. So we're talking about over a decade total of working with this material more or less every day, usually every hour. Account reinstatements, of course, are well known for that. High success rate on every account type of account suspension type. And then we work a lot with sellers who are losing individual ASINs. I guess that's the most important part of Q4 planning. Sometimes your top selling ASIN goes down, and of course, wrong time of year to struggle to get that ASIN reinstated. You could be losing thousands every hour, thousands every day, and the plan of action process, which we're experts in. Of course, we're all former Amazon on my squad. We're experts in the POA process, plan of action, or in escalations as well. And more recently, in terms of helping sellers report abusive attacks when they're getting their brand attacked, or their seller account receives bad safety complaints, bad counterfeit complaints, nonsensical gibberish that may be fake, not from a real buyer. And of course, in many cases, Amazon executes those and rubber stamps them as legitimate anyway. So we work on those as well. And heading into Q4, there's just a lot going on. I'm sure we'll be talking about account suspension policy changes today. We'll be talking about abuse cases, what's going on in the black hat community that's impacting so many of the brands that we work with and help manage, and the future of reselling. I work with private label brands and with resellers as well. So it's great to be here. We should do this more often, Kate. I don't know if you have good questions already there, but yeah. We should make this like a monthly thing, I think, because
because things change so quickly too, and it's good for us too, because sometimes you and I, we kind of I sell on Amazon, so I'm in it, but I don't know the issues that everybody else is facing. So it's good for me to know, okay, what are other Amazon sellers dealing with? What are their tricky spots, their pain points? I've kind of told people no questions are off limits. So if there's a question you're not comfortable talking about,
right,
let us know, and we will save those questions. But so just so you know, I guess, ask any question you have at this point.
I've heard everything. Yeah, some things I can't answer if they're outside my area of expertise. I usually try to send somebody to the right place. If it's legal in nature, I can direct you or refer you to a good, competent IP attorney, for example. But I'm not an attorney. That's something to note. And then, we can always table something or put it off, talk offline if it's something that's not appropriate for the forum today.
So I'm going to jump into our chat. We've got a question from Kurt. He says, our indexing of search terms fluctuates a lot. We go stretches with great page placement, giving us strong sales. Then we seem to disappear multiple pages down the list.
Yeah, I get these questions. I'm not a PPC expert guru per se, but I do. In fact, this is interesting. I've been talking way more than usual with experts in PPC about the types of problems that sellers are facing like this. More often about PPC abuse or attacks, but I'm kind of fine tuning my list of people who know this cold, and you need somebody who knows it, expert level knowledge to address these issues. I know people have been kind of floating back from page 2 to page 17 because, I mean, this has been happening more and more. I've been seeing it in my inbox. I don't necessarily have a direct strategy. We can try to come to some understanding on causality, what might be driving it down in terms of keyword searching, but that would be kind of a tandem project with me and somebody else. So Kirk can just reach out to me and I can pair them. It's sort of what we do with the legal issues as well. I mean, I typically refer people to an IP attorney for strictly legal interpretations, and then I handle the Amazon strategy, the Amazon process side of things. PPC related issues are similar. So, I mean, some of it's just, people rev up for Q4, they employ new tactics, maybe hire some new third-party services, and they really know what they're doing, and you had it easy before, and it's tougher now. I mean, sometimes there's no ready-made explanation for that. So
Kurt, reach out to Chris. Are you okay if I send
That's
him
fine.
your email address?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to jump to Mark. He is asking, are there any companies offering account suspension insurance?
There's Well Insurance. There may be somebody other than them, but I only know of Well right now. There were other companies. There were multiple companies this time last year who were offering those services. Most of them, I think, decided that it wasn't a good enough market. It didn't make sense from a cost perspective. I think so many people get suspended. Insurers just view the marketplace and view risk so differently than the rest of us in terms of what's profitable for them. So Well Insurance, WELL, is the one company that I know about. I've had personal interactions with them, and I'm pretty much sending everyone their way at this point because I don't know of anyone else in the industry who's offering this. I mean, maybe in the future they will.
Okay, next question from Tim. Will Amazon ever get rid of fake reviews and review fraud? They seem to talk a good game. Yeah, but do nothing about the problem. I feel your pain, Tim. I really do.
And we've talked about this before, right? Like you said, sometimes we riff without recording, but we've talked about this so much over the months and years. I don't think the current state of affairs is going to last much longer. I hear rumblings inside that they're going to change. I think they have to change how they manage product reviews in general, not just abuse. I mean, with any of it. Will there be good changes? Will there be bad changes? Will they be sweeping or will they be minimal? I don't know yet. I'm still looking into that just the way you are probably. But I think we can all agree that the current state of affairs can't continue. There's way too many fake positives. There's too many fake negatives from competitors. Those teams are unreachable. I mean, I could go on for a long time about this subject because I've sunk a lot of time into this topic. I've wasted a lot of time personally on this topic, just trying to find somebody who's willing to take ownership, take some responsibility in terms of who's managing those teams, how responsive are they, if they get good, bona fide, easy to review, verifiable information, are they willing to act on that? Or do they just toss it in the pile with the rest of the stuff that they don't take action on? It's one of the weakest areas of enforcement right now at Amazon. And I think part of it is because they're just not sure what the path forward is. I think maybe they've experimented poorly in a couple of areas, but it's a tools issue. There's an engineer side of it. There's a human, standard operating procedure side of it. It's not the easiest thing in the world. It's going to be a steep hill for them to climb no matter how they do it. But I think they just have to find the best way to get it done. It can't keep going like this. So.
Yeah. And it's, you talk about, things that we discuss kind of off recording. Every time that I talk to anybody for the podcast, I probably talk to them 3 or 4 times longer than what you actually hear.
Right.
And this is a pain point for every single person that I talk to. Every seller, every single company that's offering like any sort of software or consulting, any of my insiders like Chris. This is a broad topic that frankly, I like talking about it because I'm hopeful that the more that it's talked about and the more stories from sellers get out there, maybe that'll really be kind of the pressure on Amazon that they need when they see publicly how much it's impacting sellers. So that being said, anyone that's out there that is willing to share your stories with the fake review problem, with any sort of black hat issue in that realm, if you're willing to share your story on the podcast, I would love to have it. You can reach me at kate@amazoninsiderpodcast.com. Again, my thought is to get as much stories and kind of bad press essentially out there to kind of really push and move that needle of, hey, this is a big issue. It's not just all these sellers at home typing on their computer. It's we're going to broadcast it and share it with people.
It's not even just reviews. I'm sure we'll have questions over the next, 40 something minutes, but it's also just general brand abuse. People's listings. I stopped using the term listing hijack because it's been misused and ill-defined so many times. So I say sabotage, but brand sabotage where listings are deleted, removed, changed, edited to things they shouldn't be, whether it's loopholes in catalog and vendor central or something else, that's right next to the abuse of reviews. I think they're all the same problem, which is if you launch a successful brand on Amazon, as long as it sells over a certain number of units a day or a week or a month, you're going to get attacked in today's marketplace. You're guaranteed that somebody will see you as vulnerable. Somebody will try to exploit their knowledge of the gaps and loopholes in the tools or the teams, and black hat behaviors that third-party services sell because they know they're going to draw revenue away from you and your successful product or brand and towards them. And they know they can do it. It's a certainty. It's a layup. So until that changes, until those people know that they're wasting their time, because Amazon will investigate them, shut their accounts down, take their brands away, take their selling privileges away, until that day, which is all up to Amazon. There's only the public pressure that we can control. We can't control what they ultimately decide to do. Until that day, we know it's going to continue to happen. So the ball is completely in their court. Of course, in terms of public pressure, the ball's in our court. So,
and that's my hope is just get as many stories out there. There's one seller I've talked with recently who they're launching a new brand and a new product for Q4, completely off Amazon. Yeah. They've kind of said it's too risky. We love this product so much. We love this brand so much. We're not going to put it out there.
It's interesting how sellers are getting to that point. Yeah, it really is. They understand over the last 18 months how it's just trended downward to the point of despair. I mean, it used to be a nuisance. Do you remember those days? I mean, can we even think back when it was just sort of annoying? I routinely, every week, I hear from at least a few people who say, like, my business is destroyed. Amazon let these people destroy my business simply because they're unwilling to read my emails. They're unwilling to communicate with me. Maybe I didn't send them perfect information the way they could, if they fine-tuned it and honed it down to the exact thing that Amazon wants to read, which is hard to know for a seller. But they should have had some signs of life on the other side of the wall. And the interesting thing is when it comes to especially product reviews, I talk to account managers all the time that tell me they have no better insider access to those teams than I do. So they're behind the wall too, and they work at the company and their marketplace growth, and they're getting paid. You're paying as a seller up to $5,000 a month for their account management services, and they can't help you with it. I mean, they might try or they might say they can help, but eventually they hit that brick wall and they can't get past it any more than the seller they're serving. So if that's the state of affairs, and I understand, Amazonians have told me a couple times it has to be this way because we have to protect those teams from undue outside influence. But it's like, well, yeah, but they also don't communicate with anybody. They don't show any indication that they're reviewing anything they're sent, which means they're a black hole. And if they stay a black hole, I just don't see. I mean, how do they learn from use cases if they stay a black hole? You know. So.
So on to other things that are annoying. Not your questions. Keep sending in your questions. But Tony has a good one. If your competitor is making exaggerated claims in their product title, like the best, etc., and this actually reminds me of Elf when Buddy walks in and he's like, "The world's best coffee! You did it! Congrats!" So Tony's wondering, what can he do? You know, if his competitor's saying we're the best, what can you do to compete?
You're talking about a private label listing, or I mean, you're
I
not supposed
would
to
assume,
have.
yeah, I would assume so, but
there's not supposed to be offer specific or seller, you know, unique to one seller specific language in a title or in product detail page content, like certain kinds of shipping, free gift included, language like, what you described a minute ago. I mean, anything superlative of that nature. If somebody else is going to be on that page with you, which is most of the listings on Amazon, there's at least the possibility that somebody will be on that page with you. That means you can't list that kind of content. But I have seen, I mean, you know, for Tony's gratification, I have seen more sellers getting warned or suspended for doing that, which means it's being reported and pursued and followed up upon by the policy teams. Not uncommon for Q3, Q4 for them to be paying more attention to something like that could result in more headaches down the road. So,
Tony has another question. If a reviewer falsely claims you're a liar, if you respond with facts, is there anything you can do?
If you're responding, well, you're responding publicly, right, with the facts. So you have done something you've already done something by doing that. If you mean reporting a reviewer, trying to get them knocked off, it depends on what they've said, what they've done. Have they done it on other items, to other sellers? Are they targeting a bunch of people or just you? You can try reporting the reviewer. If they've got a bad pattern of behavior, Amazon will likely consider removing them. Yeah. So, especially if they think they're associated with one of your competitors and there's some pattern that indicates that might be the case. You never know when a reviewer may have left reviews with the same exact wording on other products. I mean, that should contribute to their investigation to remove them. So.
All right, let's move to John. Hello, and thanks for doing this. Thanks, John. We're glad you like this. He says, I'm wondering if you can explain the reason for continuous emails saying that listings have been deactivated due to potential misuse of trademark items.
The potential, so those are the suspected IP complaints. And I understand, and it's not just trademark, it could be suspected any kind of intellectual property infringement. This is something that's a preemptive strike on Amazon's part because they associate a large number of IP complaints or maybe just strife with the brand itself, the rights owner, on those ASINs, or maybe a group of products, not just one ASIN. And they're trying to reduce the likelihood that you as a reseller will be hit with an infringement because it means they have to do something. That's where that came from. I mean, I don't know what Amazon's company line is on what those are supposed to mean, but I have my own ideas about where those came from. And I kind of don't blame them to an extent because they're under siege with rights owner infringements are coming in every second of every day and in the thousands, I would imagine, and sometimes more. So they have to do something. They can't have their investigators only looking at infringement claims all day. That being said, they're suspected. You haven't gotten an actual notification. You may not have lost your listing. You don't have your warning, the warning in your account health. You don't have the listing removed. So what does this thing actually mean? It means that you're possibly selling a brand that's about to come after you. It's kind of a warning shot and a heads up. Get some proper legal advice, figure out if you've actually done something or if you're at risk of being held accountable for doing something. But it's not the same as an actual IP claim coming into your account. Or you need a retraction.
Next question comes from Chris. A client got dinged for having a duplicate account. We found the issue. It was an innocent mistake. what's the best way to get that resolved?
I'd have to hear more about what the circumstances are around the innocent mistake. I guess I could make some educated guesses. They got dinged, meaning they got warned for multiple accounts. Obviously, you want to close the account, the second account that they want you to. You don't want to lose your original established account, I'm assuming. You could send an email to Seller Performance explaining how it happened, why it happened, giving them some causality, some background, and then indicating what your solution is. If you're trying to keep both accounts, it's very difficult to retroactively appeal or ask permission to Seller Performance for a second account. I'm not really familiar with that being successful that much of the time. So you're probably looking at closing one of the accounts. And of course, the more recent one is likely the one that you should close. So.
All right, next question, Tony. Again, if you are the sole manufacturer of a product and the sole seller, why would you not always register at 100% for winning the buy box?
In case Amazon wants to start selling your item themselves. You're the only seller on the listing. You should be winning the buy box all the time. The buy box algorithm is sort of designed to not be focused on just one party, one seller all the time. But there are periods where there's a blip and you're not on there. I've heard of several cases like this over the years, and that's more of a buy box algorithm question that I would have a bit more trouble reaching an answer, a final answer on. But it's just the nature of the buy box algorithm is that you don't have the same party getting it 100% of the time. So.
Next question, Tyler. And Tyler, I feel like you're asking for his secret sauce here. But he says,
Tyler.
As an agency and former Amazon employee, what additional paths do you have for resolving issues and contacting Amazon that aren't available to professional sellers?
I actually share quite a bit of that publicly. I don't keep too many cards. I mean, there are certain situations where we've pursued a particular, I assume he's talking about escalations. Maybe he can clarify if you mean like an ACE and reinstatement or something like that. At this point, we don't just do reinstatement work. We do a wide variety of services. So it depends on, sometimes I just need a question answered and I already know the person who knows the answer. So I can just reach out to them, phone or email or whatever, and say, hey, I have a seller. It doesn't even have to be a client. If I know I can get the answer quickly, I'll do that. If you're talking about people who are stuck, there's different ways and different types of stuck, I suppose. There's stuck where Amazon doesn't respond to you at all and you simply need an answer. Well, yes, we write escalations and work with people to get answers. And we don't necessarily know the answer is going to be good or bad before we send that in. There are other times where they've appealed numerous times on their own, or they wrote a Jeff escalation email and everything's been responded to, but it's been rejected. That's a different kind of escalation. So, do I have some other channels, some other paths? Yeah, it depends on the degree of severity of stuck, I guess you'd call it. But normally we're doing things that, we at least start with the proper channels to see if we want to give Amazon a fair shot at responding to a case properly and reviewing it accurately, answering it, because a lot of our clients, whatever nightmares they've heard about out in the world, we get them through, fairly smoothly early on in the process. And we don't have to just assume that there's going to be an escalation down the road. We might caution them that is possible. But in terms of other anecdotal paths, it's kind of case by case, and I'm really careful about not mixing apples and oranges when it comes to different kind of types of appeals and escalations. So I have to kind of size them up uniquely one at a time and figure out what the best path is.
And it's, you mentioned every situation is different. Every seller is different. Every, even any issues that seller has, even if it's the same issue, it still could have a different path for resolution. I will say one of the things that you've talked about is escalating through brand registry. If you have a brand and you own that brand and your brand registered, you've seen some success there. You've talked about it on podcast episodes, and I've seen success and heard of success stories from sellers that have escalated that route.
Yeah, we've done a lot with brand registry in 2019. 2018, I think we're still kind of finding the best ways to escalate within brand registry. Some of that was just good fortune, finding a couple of teams within brand registry, I suppose, that were open to use case examples like the ones I mentioned a moment ago. How do product reviews teams know how to fix it if they don't get enough use cases or examples? Brand registry was actually open to that. And I'm sure they understood that I'm somebody who has a bunch of great examples for them to go through. So, and there's an ebb and a flow. I mean, it's not a constant open door. It's maybe a revolving door sometimes. But you can make some headway on the escalations through brand registry because they know that they're charged with the responsibility of protecting brands. If they can't protect a branded business, no one wants to launch a new product or even move their private label brand to the marketplace, which means growth stalls. And that speaks to their core mission. If they can't get it done, then maybe we can expect changes within brand registry, just like we do in the reviews abuse teams. But at this point, I'm expecting changes. Like you said, there's a lot of, stories floating around out there. There's a lot of scrutiny about how these teams are managed, and how the decision making is handled. And if the S team executives study the bad stories they hear, if they study seller cases, if they talk to the people managing these teams, and they come to the conclusion that an overhaul is required, none of us should be surprised to see or hear about an overhaul on any of these teams. Rights owner infringements, product reviews, marketplace abuse, or listing sabotage and brand abuse, or brand registry. Any of those are on the table, I would say, at this point. So,
all right, let's move to Tim. When will Amazon require proof of product liability insurance? I'm eager for that to happen, as it should weed out the riffraff. I agree with you, right. Tim. It should.
Good news, Tim. Thanks to the Wall Street Journal story a couple of weeks ago, I think that hastened, and that was a really well-researched, well-put-together story. Mm-hmm. And we've been waiting 2.5 years for that, maybe, I would say. I mean, we've seen some pieces of the story, and we understand that it's not necessarily 100% up to the press to bring these to light, but they are pretty good at that sort of thing. That's what their mission is. So we waited a long time for it. We finally got that story. Maybe we're finally going to see product liability, proof of insurance before you can list and sell. I mean, just as one example for consumables like supplements or other consumables, I've been waiting a couple of years for there to be some sort of, we need abundant evidence from your testing laboratories and the FDA and so on and so on, just that this item is safe to consume before you even get your toe into that doorway. I think it'll happen sooner rather than later at this point. It's a shame it took 2.5 years of on and off reporting. I mean, I've been talking about this for a long time. So I'm kind of surprised that it's taken from 2016 or 2017 till now. And hopefully this is it. We caution ourselves against false optimism, but cautiously optimistic.
Amazon is swayed by bad press. In the weeks leading up to the Review Club suspension, or not suspension, but change, there was, I shouldn't say weeks, months leading up, there was a ton of bad press. And Amazon, essentially overnight, it was a big shock to, I know, a lot of us when they made that announcement. So don't be surprised if it's something that just seemingly pops up out of nowhere. And if you're not familiar with that Wall Street Journal article, it's really good. They did an investigation into about 4,000 items, and they found things that were illegal to sell, things that were unsafe, things like children's toys that hadn't been regulated, stuff like that. It's a super, super good article. There's also a case happening right now out of Pennsylvania. A woman got hurt several years ago and sued, and right now Amazon is appealing. The lower court ruled that Amazon is indeed a seller. They're appealing that ruling, but depending on how that shakes out, that could be something too, where they're really enforcing liability onto the seller, and you have to have that liability insurance. So those are a couple things at play
Definitely.
along in that.
And also, I don't know if you saw the Consumer Reports article. I mean, the consumer press is much more involved and interested than they were earlier this year, last year, any other year. I talked to Jake at Consumer Reports. He wrote that long story a couple of weeks ago.
Yep, about the hijacker.
I guess we can include it in your feed here, but the consumer press has been contacting me 10 times more than they normally have, looking for, I think people are looking for more synergy in the conversation around Amazon, not just, is this a seller problem or a buyer problem? These are marketplace problems. Well, who's in the marketplace? We all are, really. We're all buying, we're all selling, or working with sellers, or talking about selling, or talking about what it's like to buy. To me, it's all the same conversation now. If something unsafe is being sold by a seller and Amazon's not properly investigating and shutting that seller down until they can at least get that problem sorted out, that means they're taking sales from a seller who has gotten it sorted out already and who's already tested their products and already has their safety documentation. So until the day comes when that doesn't happen, buyers are at risk, and consumers are going to have these types of concerns that people like Consumer Reports are looking into now. So,
and I should add, with the podcast, I also have a newsletter that you can sign up for at keywordpodcast.com, and I spend hours each week reading all these different articles that come out, reading everyone's blogs and kind of pulling together the information that I think that you guys need to know. So you don't necessarily have to search for it. I know it's really hard to stay on top of your business and also kind of stay up to date. So that's kind of a shameless plug, but feel free to subscribe to that newsletter so that you get it about once a week, and it has kind of, here's all the big stuff that's going on. Here's the things you should care about, and here's why. I think
sellers have to be aware, they have to put some time, put 30, 45 minutes a day into, maybe it seems like there's a story in Bloomberg that doesn't pertain to you necessarily. It's just a general story about the marketplace you're selling, but be aware of those trends. People who trade the stock, the Amazon, analysts and Wall Street traders and so forth, stock analysts, they're paying attention to that stuff for a reason, because it impacts the way the stock moves up or down. But guess what? Amazon pays attention to it too. And it means that Amazon's behavior is trendy too. We know it is. We've seen them react to things. And one reaction they have is they don't want to go through another bad story in the press. So they want to prevent things. That impacts sellers. That always does.
All right, let's go to Sharon. She says, we are brand registered. We have some bundles with other sellers on them. We struggle with getting Amazon to take down the other seller. We have purchased their product and sent pictures to Amazon showing the product is not the same as ours, yet Amazon does nothing.
So I guess the question for her is she reporting them for IP violations, notice claims, or is she reporting counterfeit? You're saying the products are different from the detail page. Obviously, there has to be a report there. But if it's an issue where you need some legal assistance, you're reporting counterfeit, you're reporting a rights ownership infringement, they're not doing anything, then that tells me that there's at least some chance you need some IP guidance there. So you can reach out to me about how to get that kind of help.
All right, next.
You can't let it continue, obviously. So,
next, David, is it always possible to get reinstated from account suspension?
No. But what types are we talking about? The code of conduct, there are some really bad ones. If they fraud your account and you can't even sign in, then your odds of reinstatement might be possible, but they're low. Depends on why they frauded your account. If you keep getting suspended for product review abuse, I can guarantee you'll hit a wall and they'll stop responding and they won't take you back. And code of conduct, which also overlaps with some reviews abuse. If they think you're going to be a problem for other sellers, for buyers, or a problem for Amazon, then those types of suspensions tend to stick and be permanent. So maybe he's hinting at what he's suspended for. I'm not sure.
Yeah, David, feel free to follow up. Next, Tyler, is there a way to contact Amazon to see if my private label brand would be a good fit for Vendor Central?
I am not a vendor expert, and I can tell you that vendors consolidating and a lot of smaller accounts are closing. So I'm not the right person to ask about vendor because I don't deal with vendor, and it seems like the vendor first party sales are changing dramatically in the very near future. So a lot of people that used to be invited to be in vendor aren't getting the invitations. A lot of smaller brands that were selling to vendor aren't seeing as many POs as they used to. What we've heard, just to kind of catch you up on the shift from 1P to 3P, is that a lot of these accounts will be closed or reduced in some way, and they're going to be encouraged to sell 3P. And there's a lot of cost reasons behind that. Amazon not wanting to manage as much inventory as they do. What we've heard is that in some categories, the cap will be, the line will be drawn at 5 million. In every other category, it'll be 10 million, and accounts that aren't retail managed that are below those numbers won't continue. So vendor is kind of experiencing a big change. I'm not sure vendors what you necessarily want to pursue right now.
And next, John, seller fulfilled Prime Prime keeps getting asked to sell this way, but after applying, no longer taking any sellers in the program. That might be
that's like seasonal. Yeah. I mean, they might have occasionally. They say it's the same as category approvals, right? We have enough. We have as many sellers as we want right now in this category. We'll let you know when that changes. Or selling this brand for brand approvals. Self-fulfilled Prime is sort of the same thing.
Tyler has a question about reviews, specifically asking for reviews. Do Amazon's guidelines permit requests for honest, non-biased reviews via buyer-seller messages?
You're asking buyers to leave you a review through messaging? Yeah, I would recommend that you use something like, Feedback 5 to make sure you're using the proper type of template that's been vetted for best practices. That's the best way to, instead of just privately messaging buyers and winging it every time. It's also more scalable to use something like that.
It's going to take you a long time to respond.
It's going to take you a long time, and you have to be very, very well aware of what's going on in terms of language and wording you can use, and you have to be very sort of conservative about how you ask for reviews now. The honest, unbiased, you're kind of using the 2016 language there, which is the old phrasing of the policy. There's a lot of debate over, can I still ask a buyer for an honest review? You certainly can't ask them for an honest review after giving them a heavy-duty discount on the product, like 90% off. Oh, can I have a review? Because honest or not, but you're inducing them to leave you a positive review in Amazon's mind, at least. You can ask for a review. Yeah, you can still ask buyers for reviews. There's nothing that prohibits that.
Tyler asks, I've been approved for merchant fulfilled Prime. Can I select which SKUs are available for Prime shipping and which are not?
I'm not the best person to ask actually about seller fulfilled Prime. I'm happy to find the right person and forward that question along for that one.
And next we go to David. If there is an inauthentic merchandise complaint and it says answer required, will my account be automatically suspended if I do not answer? In the past, I have answered and have been suspended, and I was wondering if it would be better to just let one product go and not answer.
You didn't get suspended because you answered. You got suspended because they were going to review your account and suspend you regardless. One product, one inauthentic complaint. You don't plan on selling the ASIN again. I mean, ideally, you do resolve it. If it's inauthentic, you come back with an invoice. You come back with an authenticity letter from your supplier or from the brand, hopefully. And you get it negated and the listing's reinstated. And then you decide after that if you want to sell it or not. But you've already cleared the problem and gotten it off of your account health. Short of that, just ditching the product, listing, deleting it, pulling the inventory out. That's, you're not really resolving the complaint that way, but that is a way of sort of distancing yourself from some of the damage, at least temporarily. But the problem becomes, what if you get another complaint like that in the future and you've already got one or two or however many that you've sort of abandoned? eventually that does catch up to you. You can't just keep doing that as a regular strategy.
Linda has a question when it comes to returns. This may or may not be in your expertise. We'll find out your thoughts. But she asks, any help for the returns that Amazon automatically refunds and the buyer sends back an empty box, or never sends anything back, but the refund stands?
Yeah, I mean, there are these companies that manage people's refunds. I mean, I can give you a reference to one of those. I haven't heard that there's a hell of a lot you can do about that, but they might challenge me and say, no, we've worked on several cases where we, worked this out for people. Refunds management isn't something I do per se, so I'm not sure if, you can expect a lot. It might be worth a try. So I'm happy to facilitate a connection to somebody that does that on a daily basis.
Next we have Greg. I'm the only seller on my listings and not brand registered. I can edit all my private label listings except for the title. They're basically locked. Is it now standard for sellers to have to author authoritative proof of UPC ownership, etc.?
Wow, so it's a private label brand, but they haven't trademark registered it?
Right.
You're leaving yourself open to a whole host of problems and negative possibilities if you don't trademark register and then brand register. Somebody can take over your listing content much more easily that way. I mean, they're already doing it for brand registered people, so imagine what they're doing if you don't want somebody to come along and try to contact catalog teams and get a different UPC in there and say that it's their brand and stir up trouble for you. If you start selling really well, somebody's going to come along and try to take that listing away from you. So, I mean, in this day and age, trademark register as early and quickly as possible, and then brand register. I wouldn't float along in the current state you're in for much more time.
And the trademark, it's not terribly expensive to do, but if you look at it as an investment into preventing future problems, it's really not expensive to do.
It takes time. I understand that it's not an ideal way of, maybe you don't want to trademark register because you're not even sure if you want to sell the product. You want to test it first, but make sure it's a very limited test cycle. Have a very defined strategy for that, because if you're not heading in the path of brand registry, I mean, again, I think brand registry in the future will do what it's supposed to do and will improve greatly out of necessity. Right now, is it haphazard? Yes, of course it is. I mean, most of these teams are. But you have to have some layer of protection. Otherwise, you're just kind of winging it. And that's just this marketplace, and Amazon isn't the right place to leave your flank exposed to that kind of attack.
All right, next we have Todd. This is a great one because you and I have actually discussed the fraud that comes to play with this issue. But he went in and changed his email, then updated bank and credit card information on his account. But Seller Performance sent them suspected malicious email and deleted bank and credit card info. Yep. This has happened 3 times. He says, any suggestions?
Obviously, that's going to depend on the particulars of why they think you're a repeat compromise. They're deleting things because they're sanitizing your account. Is it an overabundance of caution? Lots of things to address. I mean, where are you signing in from? Were those the only details that were changed? Does it look like you may have, one reason that they don't like this kind of behavior is if it looks like you may have sold your account, that's against policy. If they think you're compromised, they're going to have to sanitize the account. I used to work on these where I would sanitize the account, I'd go through, I'd cancel any pending orders that didn't belong if it was an account compromise. And then next day we saw the same account because the sign-ins were persisting. So sometimes it's actually, other compromises elsewhere in your ecosystem. Or you've lost control of your email, the primary email associated with your account, which the best way to not have this headache is to have a primary email that only you know, and you're only using it in one place. Otherwise, if you lose the email address, of course, the emails are going to an email address that you no longer control. And that's a huge problem because you can't even see what's going on with your alerts. So.
All right, next is Susie, and she has an FBA issue. Recently, she sent a case of 6 items. They said they only received 5. She opened an investigation, even though But even though the shipping box weight obviously meant the 6 items were inside, they ruled there were only 5. So it looks like one of her units just disappeared, and there's nothing she can do about it. This may or may not be in your expertise, but
Well,
maybe
this
you have
is
some
again,
advice.
and yeah, I mean, I usually talk to the guys at Getida about this. It's Getida. This is the second or third time it's come up, so maybe it's worth mentioning them because I've sent them a lot of happy people. I haven't had any complaints so far, and they work on issues like this. But this is extremely common. I mean, I have sellers who tell me every single shipment is considered short, and they say there's missing items in all of their shipments, at least some percentage of the items in the box. So. This seems to be just a pan Amazon problem. Is it a solvable one? You might have to just get some advice from people who deal with that on a daily basis and also are used to submitting tickets asking for refunds. So.
All right. Next question comes from Rob. We have our own brand, but also sell other brands. Can I register my brand while leaving the other products I sell unregistered?
You can, if you want to create headaches for yourself down the road. You mean unregistered brands because it's not your brand? Well, I mean, you can be that brand registered agent with brand registry. There's a process for that. If the brand's never going to register and you're reselling it, then you're just kind of winging it until you get to the point where there are problems. Most brands that have any success rate at all on Amazon are registered for a reason. It's because you need brand registry as a layer of protection that you didn't need 4 years ago, but that's where brand registry came from. They knew that if they didn't create a system like this now, they were going to have to pay the dividend later, which would be, various nightmares that nobody wants to deal with, Amazon or the seller.
This next one's from Leslie. And she says, are you able to set up 2 Seller Central accounts if you have 2 different brands that you are selling? She says, we are the manufacturer. Amazon had confirmed that we could do this as long as our bank account information and main email is different in our second account. Based on your last reply. Oh, so she's referencing earlier, there was that company that was in trouble for having 2 accounts. She says, it sounds like we could be suspended for this.
You could be. They used to just send a warning and tell you to pick one, or we know you have 2 accounts. They would mostly, I would, when I was doing this work, I would send a warning if I thought that the person had just opened accounts based on their own interpretation of the policy. Oh, these are 2 different bank accounts. These are 2 different brands. I'm just going to open a second account. It's not really the way it works. You need to contact Seller Performance in advance and get permission for that second account. And one reason why Amazon's so cranky around multiple accounts is because people don't send that email. They don't ask for permission. They decide on their own what the policy is, and they decide on their own that they're not violating it, and they start opening accounts, which makes life miserable for Amazon. So get permission for it. You're not supposed to be selling the same brands on multiple accounts, as you noted. That's true. But you want to send them an email which sets out all of the differences between the 2 businesses, the proposed second business and the one that you've got now. Why you have to establish need, not just we would like a second account. You have to act and prove that you need one. And it has to match up with their criteria as well, not just different company name, different address, different bank account. I would make a lot of things different just to sell it and make it clear that you need separate accounting procedures. You need separate everything to keep those 2 businesses functioning as they should. So.
Especially if you're building 2 different brands and you're thinking at some point you might sell one of them. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like from her question that she's talked with Amazon. That's great advice for everyone. If you're interested in doing that, talk to Amazon in advance. Make sure they know.
But don't assume just because you could create, if you could create a new account every time you started a new brand, then you could have 16 accounts with 16 brands. So, which
actually sounds like a headache to me.
But multiply that out. Obviously, if you could open as many accounts as you want, they would have to spend way more of their resources watching all of your additional accounts. So.
Mm-hmm. This is from Lana. She says, "Why do so many brands not want their products to be sold on Amazon?"
Pricing. The quality of the representation. Don't forget the brand doesn't necessarily have a say on what's on the product detail page. Maybe they don't like the images. Maybe the images aren't accurate. They show older packaging, but all those items are being sold new, different from what you would see if you walked into a store and bought that brand. Maybe they don't like product detail page bullets. The list goes on and on. They're also, don't forget, they're afraid of counterfeit sales. So even though people might be buying through retail arbitrage or buying through reliable supply chain, the brands don't necessarily know that. When they see your storefront, they don't necessarily know who you are. So they have to use, I'm not saying I agree with this necessarily, but they have to use the infringement tools to figure out who you're sourcing from. They can't rely on Amazon necessarily to nail down the counterfeit problems. So they have to have their own, attorneys and compliance people and their own procedures for figuring out who's reselling what at what price. I mean, naturally, it's only logical if they see a low price point that they would be wondering, well, is it a discount? Is the seller selling a discounted item, or is it possibly counterfeit? There's no way to know until you actually buy. So,
next question, and we've got like about 10 minutes, so I apologize. We're not going to
I'll give shorter answers. I just
no, you're
I get
fine.
deep into the responses.
But I'm going to kind of go rapid fire a little bit. Commingled inventory was the cause of fake goods issue on Amazon. Now the 2D barcodes that they're demanding is the solution, and they have the brands now responsible for the cost of it. Any comments? So he's talking about like Project Zero.
Transparency and Project
Transparency,
Zero.
yeah.
I mean, these things are still, they're not wide enough for us to understand how well they're working, possible gaps or, Project Zero, some people think that that's not going to make any difference, that counterfeiting is still going to occur. Other people think, no, there's eventually going to be a solution that just works. And it'll be like the polio vaccine, and almost nobody will have counterfeit sale problems on the site. I mean, we're going to have to see a year or two or maybe 3 of results before we know how pervasive something like Project Zero will be. And then we'll have the right population size to pull random samples out of it and see, well, does it work for this brand? Does it work as well for this brand? Is this a labeling system? It's interesting that you bring it up because there are companies approaching me that want to, you work with brands. We've got a new labeling system. We have a better labeling system. And they approach me with various kinds of technology. And it's like, well, it has to be interesting to Amazon too. Amazon has to adopt it. So I'm not necessarily the guy to lobby Amazon about labeling, but I mean, we hope these things work. We hope there's a reduction in counterfeit. Don't count on it necessarily. You still have to focus on your own due diligence to make sure that you've got everything locked down and you've got all your bases covered and there's no avenue of approach for counterfeiters.
All right. Brent asks, again, I'm going rapid fire. Is it possible to update UPCs? Say a product was created with GS1 UPCs, but they're not tied to your business. Now you want to update to new UPCs. Is there a way to do that without losing ranking reviews, etc.?
Right. So, and this is a good question for me to table, and we'll just, in the interest of time, Leah McCabe has written, she's the kind of leading expert on this whole GS1 UPC topic. If you have a specific question like that and you want to go to my website and just submit it through the contact form, I'll put it into her hands and get you an answer, because the GS1 stuff is a longer conversation, unfortunately. So.
Next question comes from Chun. We received an inauthentic complaint email from Seller Performance for a perfume that we sell. The email said, "Our listing will remain active, but please resolve the issues that caused the complaint. Review your listings and make sure that the following points are reviewed." It also said, "You do not need to reply to this email. We have our manufacturer invoices. Do we send them in? If so, how, when the Seller Performance email told us no need to respond?"
Yeah, they didn't ask you for a plan of action because it's not a hard block. It's not a performance notification where they say, we need to see your invoice, we need to see your plan of action, and we need many things from you, some sign of life, in order to reinstate your listing. A lot of people don't respond because they don't necessarily want the listing reinstated. In the case that you're describing, it's a soft block. The listing isn't down, so you know you're not sending a plan of action, which is good. You asked if you should be sending in invoices. If you have access to that listing now, I think really what you're doing is some due diligence on your own to make sure that you've identified the reason why a buyer may have reported the item to be inauthentic. You don't necessarily have to communicate with seller performance or policy teams on every single soft block. And it's not realistic to think that you could do that anyway. So return rates are going past 5%. You're not sure why. Buyers are complaining about similar, condition or quality issues. That's where you're focusing your energies, not so much on writing to Amazon, but maybe should you be delisting that item until you can figure out why the returns are high or the complaints are forming that kind of discernible pattern.
And just to kind of wrap up, it is Labor Day. I feel like it's practically Q4. Really, like Happy New Year at this point.
It's Q4. I don't care what today is. It's Q4.
It's Q4. So, every year at Q4, we kind of see there's kind of a repeatable theme as far as either black hat tactics or kind of different steps Amazon takes in suspensions. So put on your forecasting hat for Q4. What should people be watching out for? What should be something that they need to have helping their account for this year?
I've been saying this only this year. I think this Q4 is going to be practically impossible to predict in terms of black hat tactics, in terms of what's going to happen with these brand attacks. Be ready for, I hate to say something generic like this, but be ready for everything. Watch the third parties that you work with. Even let's just talk about performance metrics. Make sure that if you're using certain companies for shipment and fulfillment and order fulfillment, make sure you've got a human being watching automated tools and automated processes, because in Q4, they have, this concept called holiday war team, which is they automate certain suspensions, or they grab certain accounts for manual review that they wouldn't grab in the 3 other quarters when it's not peak holiday. There's a reason for that. They know more orders are at stake, more buyer experiences are at stake. So whether it's a third-party service that you're integrating with, or how you are optimizing your listings, you may be going for a new angle with your listings now because you're trying to capitalize on Q4. Are you doing that in a best practices compliant way? Are you sure when you're monitoring policy changes, the rules 100%, or you've got somebody who's compliance knowledgeable helping you do that? You kind of have to watch all these different things: your item quality, your return rates. Are people complaining about the condition? Do you have a chance to improve your packaging now for orders 2 months from now? There's a lot you have to keep an eye on, unfortunately, but hopefully you're not a one-man or one-woman show, and you've got a support network that of people who can help you kind of manage all these things, because unfortunately Amazon's a very unforgiving marketplace, and people who suspend your account or review you considering suspending your account don't necessarily want to talk about the 80% or 90% that you're doing correctly. They'll just want to focus on the 5 or 10 that you're not. So.
Mm-hmm. And keep in mind too that often the people we talk about Amazon kind of being like this machine. Mm-hmm. The people that are suspending you may not totally understand why they're suspending you. They just know this is the process you follow, which can be frustrating.
They may get lost reading your account annotations, mm-hmm. and doing it quickly. There's lots of opportunity, without getting into too many specifics, there's lots of opportunity for mistakes to be made when they're investigating a seller account. Whether it's how they interpret and read your account annotations, maybe you've got 1 million annotations and they have to quickly go through that. Maybe it's the appeal that you sent in to get an ASIN reinstated. They have to review that. Maybe you wrote something that's too long. They skim that too. There's about 6 different places, or 7 or 8 or whatever, that they could fumble something and annotate your account and forget to message you back, or make a mistake on their own and misinterpret their own SOP. It's limitless. There's so many people working on these things. There are a lot of opportunities for failure on both sides of the fence, on Amazon's side and on the seller's side. So if you have kind of both of you are blind, you can imagine that it's tough to meet and figure things out in the middle. So you just have to kind of keep your eyes open, be aware of trends. I was talking about escalations earlier. Don't send the same thing over and over just because you read in a forum or on some Facebook group that, oh, you need to escalate it here, without even thinking about what you're escalating. I mean, we send unique custom escalations to different places. We don't send the same thing everywhere. Why do we do that? Is it because we love extra hours of work? Not really. It's because we don't think they'll be successful unless you customize. And that's the kind of brain you want to go into Q4 with.
Well, Chris, thank you so much. Again, Chris used to be the guy that would suspend you. Now he's the guy trying
to. That was
to
a long time ago. Okay.
that was now he's trying to prevent it.
Yes, I have learned the error of my ways, and I've dedicated my life to helping and supporting sellers.
Welcome to the right side, the light side.
I found the light. Yes, I found the light. Correct.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. This has all been recorded. I know that some of you may have been in and out, or maybe you're half listening while you're in a meeting or hiding out from Hurricane Dorian, whatever you're doing. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for bringing all of your questions. If you have additional questions, you can reach out to Chris at ecommercechris.com. You can also find me at keywordpodcast.com. Thank you guys so much. I will send this out to you all sometime this week so you can watch it, take notes. I don't know, revisit your favorite parts.
Torture yourself.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Okay. Take care.